Hi, I'm Laura Coleman. Welcome to February's edition of the Pink House Cooking Kitchen. So a little bit about myself. I am a 5-year breast cancer survivor. Years ago, I was in the culinary field and then had children and left the culinary field and then got into the fitness end of the business as my children got a little older and became transitioned from a personal trainer to a cancer exercise specialist. So now I work with cancer survivors, mostly breast cancer survivors, but also through Levine, all types of cancer. So what we're doing today in honor of Valentine's Day, and this is my only red shirt that I have, so that's why I'm wearing this shirt. I decided to kind of do a soup, especially since this weekend and this whole week is pretty rained out. And we're going to go with Italian wedding soup. And Italian wedding soup has nothing to do with weddings. So originally Italian wedding soup, all it means is a marriage of broth or a marriage of flavors. So that's kind of how it got its name. So it's not served at Italian weddings at all. But I just thought it had like a really nice, like romantic name, and it could be a romantic dinner on a Sunday rainy night for you and your honey. And to kind of still kind of go off the whole Rebecca Katz and the Cancer Fighting Kitchen program that the Pink House will be introducing, I believe in April, we're going to again highlight one of her desserts. And what I love about Rebecca Katz's desserts is that it's all natural sugar. She doesn't add pure cane sugar into it. Every now and then you might see a little bit of dark brown sugar, but everything in today's truffle is all from natural sugar. It comes from dried cherries and dates and a little bit of vanilla extract and then the dark chocolate. There's very little sweetness in the dark chocolate, but you'll see as we go from there. So I'm gonna get the truffles ready because they have to refrigerate. I mean, it says for about 2 hours, but I'm gonna toss them in the freezer so we can breeze through it. I do want to make 2 corrections to the recipes, and I'll send them to Leslie and she'll mail them out again. In the format that I did them, it cut off the last ingredient on each side. So for the Italian wedding stock soup, you're going to add 6 cups of chicken broth. And for the chocolate cherry walnut truffles, you may miss this or may not. There's a 1/4 teaspoon of curry powder that's added to the coconut. So I'm going to do a few without the curry because my husband doesn't like curry, but I'm going to try and sneak some in there with the curry. So you can leave the curry out if you don't want it, but curry has some great anti-inflammatory properties. It has, what else? It helps with aid in digestion and boost memory. So there's a lot of great nutrients or health benefits to the curry. So we're going to get started with the truffles. So we're going to start off. I boiled some water here, so we'll get that going in a second. But I want to show you how I shave the chocolate. And I use Evolved. I use whatever dark chocolate I have. This is a chocolate that I nibble on, so it's kind of one of my favorite chocolates. It's a little more on the expensive side, but like if I'm eating it, I think there's like 8 squares in here, 6 squares, I'm not even sure. But I eat like a square and it totally satiates like my chocolate craving. It might take a while for you to get used to the dark chocolate if you're not eating it, but like 70% is a good starting point if you're looking to transition. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna chop it small so that it'll melt with the water. And I cut all the other squares up earlier. So there you go. Get every little bit back into that bowl. And wipe off my board so that the soup doesn't taste like chocolate. But there we go. So I have my chocolate and I have my water, and I am just going to pour 2 tablespoons of hot water, boiling water, over the chocolate. And then it's gonna melt. So I am gonna stir it with my little whisk and get it all to melt and incorporate. And it should melt if you cut it small enough. If it doesn't seem to melt, then you could just get another little bowl of hot water and stick this on top of the bowl that has the hot water in it to melt any last little bit that's in here. But it's going to be incorporated into like all the other ingredients. So if there's a little tiny little nub of chocolate, that's not a terrible thing, right? So this is all melted. You can see in here, it's all nice and melted. And I'm going to put that to the side. So I have my little mini chopper out. I'm hoping that everything is going to fit in here. It's awfully loud too. And of course, doesn't want to cooperate. If this doesn't work, I'm going to have to get my big one out. I just was hoping to kind of get this to kind of. There we go. I was turning it the wrong way. So you can see I don't use it all that often. So I'm going to put my walnuts in here, and I pre-measured all of my walnuts. So the walnuts, I think it was about, what was it, a half a cup of walnuts. So I'm going to put them in here, and I'm going to coarsely chop my walnuts. And again, it's a truffle, so it doesn't have to be like a fine powder. You want maybe a little crunch in it. So those are coarsely chopped. It probably resembles, you know, the size of like maybe a Panko breadcrumb. Then I'm going to add the cocoa powder. So I pre-measured the cocoa powder to go kind of to get things moving. And it's just a tablespoon of unsweetened cocoa powder. Sorry, I'm going to put that one in there. And we're going to add the dates. So pre-measured the dates. So I had dates left over from last month's class. So I'm just using those, and I just pitted them. And then I cut them into quarters. I think the recipe says to cut them into halves, but they were pretty big dates, and I felt like it would be easier to cut them into quarters. So what else are we putting in here? We're putting in a teaspoon of vanilla. And if you're a little heavy on the vanilla, that's fine. I usually tend to go a little heavier on the vanilla because I like the flavor of it. And a little smidgen of sea salt to kind of bring out the flavors. And now I'm going to pulse this. I'm going to look at it. You just want it, this is good. You want it just to be able to come together. I'm going to add a little more, just grind it a little more. All right, there we go. So you can see it's all kind of ground up. I'm going to put it in a bowl. Transfer it to this bowl here. And I forgot the cherries, so I'm going to have to get those in a second. Let me grab the cherries. Sorry, excuse me. So I bought unsweetened dried cherries. They're tart cherries, and it calls for about 1/4 cup. And I'm just gonna chop them up because these are not gonna get pulsed in. So just a coarse chop. So you want little pieces of the cherry to kind of come through in the truffle. Really sticking to the knife. And she comes out like every now and then she comes out with like new truffles. So I think this month she sent out a in her blog and her newsletter. It's a, is it, Tammy, is it a citrus almond one? I know we were talking about it.
I don't know, Laura. I haven't looked at that yet.
Looked at it. Oh, so I know it's citrus based because she talks a lot about citrus, and I believe it's orange. And for some reason, almond is sticking in my head, but I know she does one with apricots as well. So I just thought cherries. Again, I'm going with that whole Valentine theme. Cherries, red. All right, so I'm gonna add the chocolate mixture. And that's what's gonna bind it. Probably should have gotten that. And I'm just gonna mix it all up, and it's gonna, now it's starting to kind of come together and hold together. And it looks like a truffle. And I'll show you this in a second after all the chocolate's incorporated. So you can see that all the chocolate's incorporated. And now I'm gonna throw in my chunked cherries. And I'm gonna stir these in. I had a little bit of a time finding unsweetened cherries. I found them in Whole Foods. I couldn't find them in Harris Teeter. So I just was pressed for time yesterday and today. So I just bit the bullet and paid for them at Whole Foods. But I'm just gonna put these in a bag and I'll freeze them. And then I'll have them from whenever I need to use them. I think they're great in salads, and I like to put them sometimes in like some of my whole grains. So my farro dishes sometimes, or with, what else? Sometimes I put them, I don't do it anymore, but in like meatloaf, only because I don't eat it. I can't remember the last time I made a meatloaf. All right. So here we go. This is all mixed up and ready to go. So all I'm going to do, and she talks about doing about 2 teaspoons. And I have this little thing here, this little jigger thing here. It's, I would say it's about 2 teaspoons. So I'm just going to go here and I'm just going to dump it into my hand and I'm going to roll it into a nice little ball. And I'm also going to get something to put this on because I obviously was not thinking. Let me just grab a tray to put this on and stick in the freezer. I'll do a few, I'll put this to the side and then I'm gonna do 3 of them and then I'll put it to the side just kind of for the sake of time. And then I'll finish them later. But I think these would freeze well. I don't know if she says on her website that they freeze well, but typically truffles freeze really well. So you can make a batch and then throw them in the freezer and pull them out when you need them. Actually, I'm gonna do 2. 2 for me and 2 for my husband tonight. I mean, I'm going to do 4 because clearly I can't add because.
I can come by if you want to make 2 more.
Oh, I know you can, Tammy.
Me too.
All right. All right, here we go. I'm going to put these in the freezer.
Did you put the curry, Laura?
No, so the curry, I'll show you, is going to get mixed into the toast, into the coconut. So I toasted my coconut, but I'm going to throw these into the freezer and we'll pull them out later. She says that you're going to roll them. It says cover and freeze. I don't think you need to. Honestly, I'm going to change this because I've done this before. So I'm going to roll them now into the coconut. I'm going to do 2 without actually the curry. And then 2 with the curry, only because, like I said, my husband is, for some reason, he doesn't like curry. So now I'm just gonna put about 1/4 teaspoon, this is new curry, into here now.
Wait, Laura, what type of curry are you using?
I'm just using
Is it a yellow
curry powder?
Is it
It's yellow.
Okay.
It's yellow curry.
Okay.
Which would look really nice with the toasted coconut. And you don't have to toast the coconut. I like my coconut toasted, especially when it's unsweetened. It just gives it a little more flavor. And I'm gonna taste, I'm gonna see what the coconut tastes, because this to me was an odd combination. I never would have thought of this. But you know, I don't know, coconut and, I mean, curry and chocolate does go well together, right? I think chocolate goes with anything.
Laura, do the cherries have to say unsweetened on them?
They do, because sweetened cherries have added sugar in them. So these are called, and they don't taste sour, but they say sour cherries, and there's no added sugars, but the total amount of sugar in it is 2.5 grams or 2 grams.
Oh.
And it just tastes like a dried cherry.
Okay.
It's not sour. It's not
got
tart.
added cherries in the one I got, and it says tart on them. So, but
How many grams? How many grams of sugar?
11, I think.
Total. How many added? It would say on the side.
Hold on. I read it when I bought them.
So Laura, it doesn't say on, and you may have mentioned this already, but I didn't catch it. How much curry are you using?
1/4 teaspoon.
Okay.
And I can smell it. I mean, it's really nice. And the only reason why I decided to roll this now is I feel like if I refrigerated them, the coating would dry off a bit, and I would have a hard time getting them to stick. So now I'm just gonna throw mine in the fridge, but I'll walk closer. I don't know how well you can see this, so they're really pretty and they look yummy. So I'm gonna stick mine in the fridge and we're gonna move on. No, but I'm gonna taste the curry with the coconut. I always have a lot of it, and I wanna see what it tastes like. Oh, it's really nice. And then I'm gonna do this.
Okay, so Laura, mine aren't very good because they're 20 grams of sugar and 11 added. So there's 30 grams of sugar.
Yeah, so.
And it doesn't say sweetened on it. That's the thing of it. So I thought it would say sweetened.
Let me tell you, the curry adds a whole nother level of flavor to this chocolate, very unexpected, and almost has like a little touch of heat to it at the very end. It's delicious. So I am sold. All right, I'm gonna clean this up and move this out of the way.
If you were doing this at the Pink House, you'd have your cleaners and preppers and all that.
I would, and then I'd also have, you know, tasters and whatnot. So yeah, I totally get it. All right.
One day soon, hopefully.
One day soon, exactly. So moving on to the soup. So with the soup, it calls for, and this is where it starts to get healthy. So instead of using pasta, because in Italian wedding soup, you use pasta, we're gonna use a whole grain. So you have a couple of options for grains, right? So, which is why I put the 3 in there. I'm going with barley tonight, but farro is a great grain, high in protein, high in fiber. Barley is a great protein, a great grain, high in protein, high in fiber. But I decided to go with barley, just because I eat a lot of farro and I don't eat a ton of barley. So for me, that's the way I was going with it.
And you also had millet.
So I have millet because that's a gluten-free option. So
yeah.
Barley and farro are not gluten-free. And we've had questions in the past. There are some people that are on a gluten-free diet. So that's why I threw the millet in there. Millet is a lot smaller than the barley or the farro, but if you're familiar with Italian pasta, it reminds me about the size of pastino, which pastinos use a lot of times in soups as well. So
what about using a buckwheat?
Buckwheat?
Yeah.
Bulgur or which one? Just regular buckwheat?
I use it when I make kasha. So like a kasha.
Like what?
Kasha.
Kasha. What's kasha?
Well, basically it's buckwheat.
Okay. You can use whatever grain you want. I mean, there's no rules to it. I wouldn't use bulgur. I think bulgur just tends to kind of it would get too mushy. I don't think it would hold up to the soup. So that would be my only concern with buckwheat, but you can try it. I mean, you could use brown rice too. Brown rice is just as healthy, but it doesn't have as much, it doesn't have as much fiber or protein in it. So I always look for the higher protein grain. So, okay, so I pre-measured some things out and I bought white ground turkey. So ground turkey is your healthier version. You could use ground chicken as well if you want. So traditionally it's made with pork and beef, the meatballs. So this is where we start to lighten things up. So I'm using a pound of white turkey meat, all right? And the reason why I did white turkey meat is because regular ground turkey has all sorts of parts added into it. So this I know is like 99% lean and only 1% fat. So to this, I am going to add all of my ingredients. I'm gonna add an egg. And there's no right or wrong way to do this, right? I'm gonna add a little bit of salt just because I grabbed that first. I pre-measured my Panko breadcrumbs. So I use Panko breadcrumbs. Panko breadcrumbs are a lot lighter than the other breadcrumbs, and Panko breadcrumbs are made without the crust. So regular Panko is made from white bread, and whole wheat Panko obviously is from whole wheat bread, but it's without the crust, which keeps it at more of a lighter kind of texture. And then, not that we do this often, but if you were to do like an air fry, it just it has a crispier texture on the outside. So I tend to use Panko instead of breadcrumbs in anything that I cook where I'm coating it, just because it just gets a crisper coating to it. I'm gonna put a 1/4 cup of Parmigiano Reggiano in here. If you like Parmigiano Reggiano and you want to add a little more, feel free. Okay, I have that. What else is going in here? I don't think anything else. Am I missing anything? Parsley and lemon zest. I'm glad I looked. So I'm going to do the zest of 1 lemon. And then I'm going to save the lemon for the end. And when you guys start looking at, or if you do the cooking lesson with Rebecca Katz, she talks about FASS, it's F-A-S-S, and it's how you flavor foods. And the flavors come from fat, acid, salt, and sweet. So she talks about how sometimes, if something just tastes off, how to balance those flavors using those 4 things. Fat, whether it be olive oil, salt, sweet, whether it be maple syrup, or, and then sour too, or acid, which would be like your lemon juice or vinegar or so on and so forth. And that helps balance the flavors. So I've got that in here. What else is going in? I'm gonna look again because I'm a little I think that's it. Parsley. If I haven't told you before, I keep the parsley and it will last, I promise you, for weeks. I had it in there for 3 weeks. I had cilantro in there in a little cup. And I snipped the edges off at the bottom and I put it in a cup of water, you know, just about an inch of water in the bottom. And about every 2 days, I change the water out and it stays fresh and crisp for weeks. So I'm just gonna shave the leaves off the parsley stems, and then I'm gonna cut this up. All right, so I'm gonna chop this fine. We've made turkey kale meatballs before in the past, and I'm a big fan of those turkey kale meatballs. You could use these. So a lot of times what I'll do when I make the turkey kale meatballs, I make a big batch and I'll make regular size meatballs and I'll make these smaller size meatballs that I can throw in soups. So this is just kind of a riff on the turkey kale meatballs, a little less work because we're not adding in, you know, chopping all that kale. So about 2 tablespoons or so we're gonna go in here. And I am gonna mix it up. I'm gonna start with a spoon. Actually, I'm gonna start with a fork because I just wanna break up that yolk. And then I'm gonna start to kind of mix it all in. And then I'll take my ring off and get my fingers in there. And these are gonna be about a tablespoon size. So basically a bite size, right? And you want them to be, you don't want them to be dense. So the less you mix them, the less dense they'll be. So be gentle when you're mixing meatballs or any type of meatloaf here. So I'm just gonna kind of use my hand. I'm gonna fold it in and press down the center. So I'm just using my hand to fold. And I know it's weird, but I smell the meat before I start to make the meatballs. I just want to make sure like I get a hint of all the flavors I put in there. Make sure I get a hint of the lemon. I get a hint of the Parmesan. All right. So this is all mixed. Give me a second. I'm going to wash my hands and I need to clear this board. So real quick, and I'll just talk while I'm off to the side. So there's 2 sides to the foil. And some people know this, some people don't. You have your shiny side and you have your dull side. Your dull side is actually the non-stick side. So if you're cooking, you want the dull side up. And it just seems like a lot of people just always seem to put the shiny side up. I don't know why. Maybe they think it reflects the heat a little better, but you want the dull side down. So I'm gonna move all of this off to the side.
Laura, what about using parchment paper instead of foil?
You could do that. Okay. I do, and the reason I'm using foil because then I don't have to wash anything. So if like it rolls over and touches the side, I don't have to wash the pan at all. I just take the foil off and throw it away.
Gotcha.
Now, probably a much bigger answer than you have, but if I wanted to do a vegetarian or vegan option, because I don't eat meat.
I don't either. Yeah, so sometimes I will, I make my own veggie burgers and it's beet based. So I'll do the same thing with that. So I'll just make small pieces of that. Or I make also an eggplant meatball. I don't know if you've ever done anything like that. And eggplant meatballs taste really good in this.
Okay, cool.
So, and then I would just switch out the vegetable stock. Switch out the chicken stock for vegetable stock. So it's rare that we have another vegetarian on a call.
I'm also pretty much plant-based.
So you're not, so you would just use nutritional yeast instead of the Parmesan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And then you could use flax instead of the egg for bind.
Perfect.
Or, you know, or even almond milk. You don't even need like that. Just something to give it a little moisture to help bind it. So this is made, I'm going to get the stock ready. My barley takes about 12 minutes. So I did 2/3 of a cup of barley. And I had frozen stock left over from the last time. So I'm going to I'm going to cook this in, I'm going to cook it in 3 cups. And it's perfect because I'm actually going to do 2 cups of stock and then 1 cup of water. I like to cook my grain in stock. It just gives it a little more flavor. And I'm actually going to use the rest of this hot water since it's already there, and it'll speed up the process.
So Laura, you cut the barley down where it says 1 cup farro. You're doing 2/3 cup barley, and then how much millet if you use millet instead?
I would still use a cup. I'm just telling you, I should have just lied and said I'm using a cup. I'm just doing it because I don't eat this. So this is basically for my husband, and then I'll freeze the rest. And I know he doesn't love like a ton of this in there. He likes it, but he doesn't like as much in there that I've put in the past. So I just cut it down, you know, and it's a personal preference. So it's going to be more hearty if you have more of the grain in there. It's going to fill you up. But he likes a little less grain. So that's the only reason why I did that. Okay. So I'm getting, and this is the barley I got. It's 12-minute barley. I got it from, where is it? Whole Foods, I think. So I bought Italian whole grain barley, and it's easy because it's 12 minutes to cook. So it goes quick. So I'm going to put all this in. This has sodium in it, so I'm not going to add any more salt. I'm going to give it a little stir, bring it to a boil, and then I'll cover it and just follow the directions on the back of the package. I know like Trader Joe's has the farro, and that's where I buy my farro from, Trader Joe's, because it's quick. So this says basically this one is quick too. It's 12 minutes. So you're going to bring it to a boil and then reduce the heat to low, and then it'll cook for 12 minutes and it'll be done, and it'll go right into the pot. And the reason why I cook it too in the broth is because I don't have to drain it. I could just add all the liquid into the broth. So it's already kind of flavored. Okay, so now I'm going to get my meatballs a-cooking. And I'm just going to make them, right, bite size. So I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm just going to take small, and it might be like a half a bite size. Put them in here. Get them going. And they don't have to be perfect, right? I love, Isabel, that you're cooking and rolling. So Diane, have you made vegetarian like meatballs or burgers or so on and so forth?
You know what? I was actually doing the impossible meats for a while. But then when obviously I got diagnosed, I changed all that.
Yeah.
I'm quite careful how I eat anyway, but
yeah,
I have gone pretty plant-based, but I still do eat eggs and fish.
I eat eggs, yeah. See, my only thing about the impossible meat is it's almost higher in fat and is more processed than regular meat. So I make all of my own.
I haven't done that yet. I use, I don't know if you know Thug Kitchen cookbook.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's really good. So I've been using that a lot and just learning different techniques and preparing my food so I don't get lazy and get, something that I don't want to eat.
Right.
What's it called, Diane? What's the cookbook called?
A Thug Kitchen.
Okay.
THUG Kitchen, Thug Kitchen. There's some curses in it, but it's really good.
Well, that's right up Tammy's alley.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
All
really
right.
great. That's actually where I learned about millet. I hadn't had millet before, and there's a lot of millet in that book, and it's really good. Like I
Yeah.
made millet meatloaf, and it was amazing.
So what was in that?
Oh gosh, I'd have to look at the recipe.
That's okay. I'm going to look it up because sometimes I get caught in a rut too. And I honestly have to cook 2 meals every night. It was great when my daughter was here before she moved to Brooklyn because she's vegetarian as well.
Yeah.
But my husband is an Irishman, and you know, and
He's
even like
potatoes.
Oh my God, meat and potatoes. I will make a pasta that, you know, it's just a bolognese, right? So a bolognese lasagna, and he's like, well, what are we having for meat? And I'm like, it's in the lasagna. He goes, no, like, where's the meat? I'm
He
like,
wants the side of meat with his meat dish.
yes, he wants a side of meat with his meat dish.
That's
He's
funny.
like, well, what about like some sausage or something on the side? Well, I'm like, oh, you want it, you go for it, but in the lasagna. All right,
Yeah,
so
it's good.
So just to save time, and I could do this a little later and add them to the I'll maybe do a couple more. I can add it to the soup afterwards. I'm just going to do a full thing. I'll do 2 more, and then I'll wash my meat-laden hands. And I chose to go vegetarian because of the cancer. So I didn't choose to go vegetarian because I didn't like meat. I mean, I liked meat. I ate it most of my life up until 5 years ago.
See, I gave up meat I probably gave up meat 15 years ago.
Okay.
When they started putting like hormones and when they started messing with the meat is when I gave it up. But then I would eat fish, or I would go back to England and I would eat meat when I went home. But I just wouldn't eat.
It's very different in the US than it is abroad.
It
very,
is.
very different. Yes.
Okay. So I preheated the oven to 375. I have my tray of cute little baby meatballs, mini meatballs, bite-sized meatballs. I'm going to throw them in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes. And I'll keep my eye on them, and then I'm going to start my soup. All right. So I've got my grain cooking. And now here we go. We're going to start with the onion. So I'm going to chop my onion. See, I haven't had to put my glasses on to see you guys because I can see you in the screen. Fine. I'm so excited.
Another cookbook, sorry, I just looked it up. Another cookbook I got was called Forks Over Knives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I do know that one. They put out a magazine too, and a blog, which you can follow.
Yeah, they had the documentary as well, I think.
I'm going to chop my onion, and I'm going to do a little something that's not in the recipe. I tend to like to put a little bit of crushed red pepper in most of my soups. It just gives it a little bit of heat. So I'm going to do the same with this. And we're going to saute this with some garlic. All right, so I've got this going. I'm going to turn the heat on. I should probably turn this up so it starts to boil. I'm going to heat my pan before I put the olive oil in. Then I'm going to put about a tablespoon of olive oil in here. Healthy fat. So I did not know that if you're a vegan, I don't know why, I've got to look it up, you don't eat olive oil.
I don't know that. I've never heard that.
I have. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. I guess a really strict vegan wouldn't do that. All right.
I know they don't eat honey.
Mm-hmm. Because it comes from technically an animal. All right. So we're going to put onion in here, and I am going to use my cheat for garlic. If you want to use garlic, you're going to chop up your garlic, but I'm going to get my freezer garlic. And again, I like to use this in soups or sauces, but if I'm doing a saute, I use regular garlic. So I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's frozen garlic already crushed and ready to go. It saves a ton of time, and it's almost in a paste, so it's great for sauces or for soups. So that's what I use in lieu of having to chop my own garlic. And I don't saute it with the onion. I put it at the very end of the saute. Okay, so I'm going to get about a tablespoon of olive oil in here.
All right, I researched it, and the reason why some vegans don't eat olive oil or they abstain from olive oil is because it is not environmentally friendly.
Oh.
Why is it? Because of when they process it, it's not environmentally friendly?
That's all it says. I'd have to read deeper. Probably because it's mass produced and like kind of the same with palm oil. Like they're clearing lands to grow the trees, to kind of keep up with the quantity, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's the same with almond milk. There was a big stink about almond milk as well and how that was being mass produced.
There's always a stink about something, right? So you're never going to be, so we're getting, yeah, right? So 6 cups of chicken broth. So I know this is 4. I have another here, and this is still a little frozen. It didn't defrost. So I'll just throw it in. I'll cut it open and throw it in. So it's like an ice cube. And it's about a cup. It's in a pretty big ice cube, you can see, right? There we go. So this is down. I'm going to cover this, simmer, and let this go for another 12 minutes. This is sauteing. When it becomes a little more translucent, I'm going to add in the garlic. It smells really good. So you know what I was just thinking too, Diane, is you can totally take your millet meatloaf recipe and make little meatballs out of that little meatloaf.
Yeah, I think that would totally work.
That would, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I said 3 cloves of garlic. You like a little more garlic? Add an extra. I'm going to do 4 of these only because they tend to lose a tiny bit of flavor as opposed to using regular garlic. So I'm going to throw 4 of these in here. So each little bulb is 1 clove of garlic. I'm going to continue sauteing this. Wait till the garlic kind of melts and starts to become fragrant. I'm checking my meatballs. I can smell the garlic, it's all melted. I'm gonna start to add my stock in. So I'm gonna put, this is 4 cups, so this is the first one that's going in. Then I'm gonna throw in the rest of this stock. So I have my 6 cups. And that cube will finally melt. I'm gonna season it with some salt and pepper. A little bit of salt. Stir all that in.
Since the broth has salt, do you have to add more salt?
Mine is low sodium, so I'm just gonna add a little more salt in here. I didn't add it to, I'll add it either to the grain or here, but that's totally up to you. You don't have to add salt. Salt is always a suggestion. If it's tasting a little flat, you can add salt in the end, but just because I know the sodium content in the broth that I use, I'm throwing a little salt in there, and I'm using sea salt. So I'm not using iodized salt or kosher salt. I'm using sea salt in there, which has a very mild flavor. Okay. So this is going. Checking my barley. I'm just gonna check and see how tender it is. It looks a lot like farro. And just a few more minutes. I like barley in here because I feel like it has more of like a pasta edge to it. So that's the only reason why I use barley. But sometimes I'll use farro too. This is my weekday wine, Pellegrino. It's more like a gin and tonic, honestly. All right, I'm gonna clean up a little and then we'll move on. And I'll talk about a few other things too. So sometimes what I'll do too is at the very end, I'll get a carrot because I like a little vegetable in there too sometimes. I would definitely do this if I was doing a vegetarian end. Way to it, or just kind of julienne carrots. You know, when you get those shaved carrots, julienne carrots in the supermarket, you just put like a little bunch of those at the bottom of the bowl and then pour your soup over it. And it gives the soup a little bit of a crunch. It's really very delicious. Okay, so we've got that going. We're gonna reduce this to a simmer after it comes to a boil, and it's gonna go for about 10 minutes at a simmer. And then once that is done, I'm gonna add the rest of my, I'm gonna add my barley. And then once the meatballs are done, they're looking good. They probably have maybe another 5 minutes. We'll be good to go. I'm gonna move some of this out of the way. I didn't add any of, but what I normally would do is just take a little bit of the crushed red pepper and saute that with the onion. I forgot to do it, but you could always add it in the end if you like a little spice in your soup. Okay. I'm gonna keep the cheese out because cheese on top is always very nice with this. All right. And I'm gonna keep the lemon out because I'm just gonna drizzle a tiny bit of lemon over the top of the soup before I serve it. And then, again, you know I'm a big Trader Joe like fan. So these Parmesan Crisps, super yummy. You just need to not eat the whole bag. So a serving size is 3 to 4 pieces, 150 calories. So I usually serve it with 2, so you're under 100 calories. And you get like that nice little Parmesan cracker or a piece of bread that you want to have with soup, and it's really very lovely with it. It's a nice accompaniment to it. So that's why I pulled these out. So I'm going to get my bowl ready. All right. this is at a boil. I'm gonna return it, I'm turning it down to a simmer, give it another little stir. I'm gonna show you what I do. I have this little peeler, and one edge is to kind of like shave like thin slices or peel a carrot, and the other is to julienne. So I'm gonna grab a carrot and I'm gonna throw some carrot in here. I don't take the skin off of my carrots because there's a lot of nutrients in the skin. So I just wash them really good. So I buy the bunch of carrots that has the, you know, the greenery at the end. I'll save the greenery, I'll chop it up, I'll use it in soups, I'll use it, and I use actually these greens in a salad. They're very nutritious, but all I'll do is I'll take this and I'm just gonna use that julienne. And super easy.
About the spinach, Laura, the spinach.
The spinach, yeah, the spinach goes in at the end. So I'll pull that out at the end. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of this and put it in the bottom of my bowl, and it just gives it a little added flavor to it. So the spinach will go in at the end after we put in the grain and then the meatballs, and then the spinach is the very last piece you put in, so it wilts, and that doesn't take long. It'll wilt within a couple of minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Let me check the meatballs. All right, the meatballs are done. I'm gonna pull them out. You can see, so they become a little opaque, right? So the pink is gone out of the meatballs. And I could just put these in. Put them in right now. I'm just gonna loosen them up. And everybody kind of has different tastes, so was it Fran, you were asking me about the salt, right? So my husband.
Yes, it was me. And the reason being is I'm not allowed to have more than 1,500 grams of salt a day.
Yeah, so then you control how much salt you put in your food. My husband, on the other hand, I'll salt something and he's got the salt out and he's putting in probably another tablespoon of salt into his food. That's the way he eats. I don't know. I don't eat that way. Okay, so I'm now going to add liquid and all my grain. I'm going to give it a stir. That was noisy, huh? Looks good. I'm going to pull my spinach out. And I like to give the spinach a coarse chop. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to pull it out here. I give it a coarse chop because sometimes, you know, you get a big leaf and you're trying to eat soup and you have this big old piece of spinach that is, you know, like that giant piece of spaghetti that you're trying to eat when you're in a restaurant and trying to look ladylike, but you're slurping it up anyway, like Lady in the Tramp, but not with your husband slurping on the other end. God.
Or your dog slurping on the other end of your spaghetti.
Yeah, that would not be cool. So this is just a personal preference. You don't have to do this. I tend to like it this way. I'm gonna do, this is about 6 ounces in here, so I'm gonna do most of it. Because spinach is so good for you. I'm gonna turn this up to a high simmer. And because I'm not gonna taste it, I'm gonna stick my finger in. Yep, it's good temperature-wise. And now I'm gonna add my spinach. The other thing you can throw in here if you want is if you want to add a little basil to give it a little bit of like a basil flavor, you could. Or just that flavor of basil, you can throw that in there. You guys, it looks so nice and clean over here, right? You should see the other end of my counter. It's a complete mess. All right, so let's give this a stir. The spinach is gonna start to wilt now. It smells delicious. I can smell the garlic. So I would give it about 2 minutes. And if you don't think there's enough spinach in there, you throw some more spinach in. That's kind of, you know, all preference too. This freezes really well, which is why I don't mind making this big batch. So he'll have it tonight and then maybe a little bit on the weekend for lunch, but then I'll freeze it in individual serving sizes. And it's nice because a lot of times, like I love miso soup, and miso soup is so easy to make, and I could pull that together in 20 minutes. And if we both want to have soup, you know, again, he'll ask, where's the meat? And it's miso soup. There's no meat in miso soup. So I'll pull something like this out, or he'll have it with egg rolls or something that have meat in it. But anyway, so let's give that a couple more minutes and I'll plate it up. Does anybody have any questions?
I did want to tell you, there is another garlic that I use.
Okay.
I have it in Trader Joe's. It's called Durat.
That's what that is.
Oh, is that Durat? Because I didn't recognize the package.
It's different packaging. So it's squares in Trader Joe's, but it's like little egg shaped in all the other stores.
Oh, that's
But it's the same brand. And it's so
okay.
funny because the packaging is completely different, but they're both Durat.
Okay.
So I buy it wherever I'm at. So, you know, Trader Joe's is it's not, you know, I have Whole Foods and Harris Teeter that are within a mile of my house. And not that Trader Joe's is that far, that's 7 miles. So if I need to run out and get something really quick, I'm going to drive a mile. So, but I'm impartial. I get it when I can get it. So, or I'm sorry, where I can get it. All right. So the spinach is a nice vibrant green. It's nice and wilted. I'm going to get a ladle out. And then I'm gonna plate it up. And I like the carrots at the bottom. It's just a little like surprise at the bottom of your bowl. Another color to kind of add in. Grab that. So I'm gonna go to the bottom because the greens kind of sink to the bottom a little bit and get a nice amount of meatballs. So I'm probably gonna get 5 to 6 meatballs in here. And then a good amount of spinach and broth. Slide this over. Here, I'm gonna get a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Or actually, before I do that, I'm just gonna take a little bit of lemon, just a tad. I'm gonna squeeze a little bit of lemon juice into here, just a couple of drops to brighten the flavor. And then I'm gonna finish it because my fingers are wet. Just a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top. And if you like the crushed red pepper, you put the crushed red pepper in there. You're gonna get a pretty little part cheap toast. And there you have it.
Lovely.
Wedding soup that you would have with your Rebecca Katz chocolate cherry walnut truffles.
Wow, what a combination.
Ta-da. So it's done.